The small village of St. Aurel, nestled among snow-covered mountains, looked like a living painting during Christmas time. The narrow streets were blanketed in white snow, while twinkling lights adorned the stone-fronted houses in harmony. Children ran along the sidewalks in colorful coats, and the sound of Christmas carols echoed from the chapel at the village's center. It was a scene that evoked the simplicity and magic of the true Christmas spirit. Yet hidden amidst this enchanting setting, there was something that captured the attention of every passerby, an old nativity scene, positioned in the chapel courtyard, with figures that seemed to tell a story yet untold. The nativity scene was special, not because of its size or intricate details, but because of its history. The figures, crafted from weathered wood, bore the marks of time, gentle cracks, faded paint, and a texture only decades of use could bestow. Each character seemed imbued with a special spirit, as if every figure could bear witness to years of celebration around it. At night, when the village lights dimmed, the nativity scene remained illuminated by a small candle that cast dancing shadows on the chapel walls. It was as if it held an ancient secret, waiting for the right moment to be unveiled. The villagers had always regarded the nativity scene with reverence, but that year, something was different. There was a feeling in the air, a silent whisper that seemed to pass from person to person. Some people claimed to feel an unexplainable energy when near the nativity. Others said they briefly heard a whisper emanating from it. It was as though the nativity itself wanted to speak, to share something the world needed to hear. The serene and tranquil nights of St. Aurel now seemed to herald something extraordinary. As the days approached Christmas, curiosity grew among the villagers. Children whispered stories about the enchanted nativity, while the adults, even the skeptical ones, felt a subtle shiver of anticipation. Was this merely a product of collective imagination, or was something truly about to happen? The entire village seemed shrouded in an aura of mystery. The chapel bells rang louder, the lights seemed to shine brighter, and each villager's heart beat with a question no one dared voice aloud. Amid this growing anticipation, a group of villagers began to pay closer attention to the nativity. Some claimed to have seen shadows move, others reported hearing a distant chant, almost like a melody descending from the heavens. These accounts spread, fueling the mystery further. The nativity, once just a symbol of faith and tradition, now became the epicenter of a story no one could have foreseen. The silence of the nights was replaced by a hum of conversations and speculation. Some believed it was a divine sign, a message for humanity. Others dismissed the stories as coincidence or the product of overactive imaginations. But everyone, without exception, agreed that something inexplicable was about to happen. The village seemed poised on the edge of an event that would forever change their view of Christmas, the nativity, and perhaps even their faith. And so, as the snow continued to fall softly and the days edged closer to Christmas, the village prepared itself, consciously or not, for a moment that would forever be etched in its memory. After all, what could be more magical than a Christmas in which the nativity itself had something to say? Little did the villagers know, they were on the verge of witnessing an event that would not only change their lives, but also reignite the flame of the true Christmas spirit. The nights in St. Aurel had grown restless. The small nativity scene, once seemingly just a display of wood and paint, began to take on a peculiar life of its own. It started with sounds, almost imperceptible. Some villagers, passing by the chapel at night, reported hearing soft whispers, like a distant melody or voices coming from an unknown place. At first, these accounts were dismissed as exaggerations or fabrications, but as the reports became more frequent, the murmurs grew and spread through the village, like the winter's icy wind. Among the villagers, reactions varied. Some, particularly the elderly, believed it was a divine sign. "God is trying to speak to us," they said, their eyes shining with hope. Others, More skeptical attributed the sounds to wind passing through the chapel's cracks or the antics of bored children. Yet even the most doubtful couldn't ignore the feeling that something was different. A certain unease lingered in the air, as though the village itself was tuned into a secret only a few could comprehend. The children, naturally curious, began to treat the Nativity as something magical. They gathered near the chapel, whispering and inventing stories about the murmurs. "It's baby Jesus speaking," one exclaimed. "No, it's Mary singing him to sleep," another countered. While these innocent tales brought a touch of lightness, the adults grew increasingly intrigued. It became impossible to deny that the sounds were indeed emanating from the direction of the Nativity, especially during the quietest nights. As the days wore on, the rumors escalated. Some claimed to have seen shadows moving among the figures, as if the characters were coming to life. Others described feeling a comforting presence, almost like an invisible embrace, when near the scene. These accounts began to divide the villagers. Some were eager to uncover the truth, while others feared that tampering with the Nativity might bring unintended consequences. The tension between faith and doubt was palpable. The chapel, which had once seen only sporadic visitors, became a gathering place. Groups of villagers met outside, debating what was happening. Some prayed, seeking answers, while others simply watched, trying to make sense of it all. The local priest, a respected figure in the community, tried to maintain calm, though he too seemed torn between fascination and concern. "If this is divine work, we must wait for the right moment to understand its purpose," he said, attempting to soothe the growing restlessness. Among all the reports, one fact was undeniable: the sounds always grew louder at night. Many villagers began avoiding the chapel after dark, wary of the unknown. Yet there were those driven by curiosity who made a point of being nearby. They described the whispers as soft, almost melancholic, yet filled with a meaning beyond human comprehension. It was as though the Nativity was trying to tell a story, but in a language no one could decipher. The mystery of the Nativity consumed the village. Families discussed it over dinner, and even travelers passing through St. Aurel carried tales of the enigma. Curiosity reached a fever pitch, making it impossible to ignore. Some villagers began proposing an investigation. "We need to find out what's happening," said a young man who swore he had heard the sound of crying coming from the Nativity. Others, more cautious, worried that any interference might disrupt something sacred. Finally, a small group decided to take action. They were people of various ages and personalities, united by a shared need to uncover the truth. "Let's gather on Christmas Eve," suggested an older woman whose unshakable faith inspired confidence in the others. "If this is a sign, surely it will be clearest on the night we celebrate the birth of Christ." The idea was accepted, and a plan began to take shape. They would meet on Christmas Eve, prepared to confront the unknown. The village, now in a state of mixed anticipation, began preparing for what promised to be a Christmas like no other. The lights shone brighter, families prayed with greater fervor, and the air seemed charged with an inexplicable energy. Everyone, even those not directly involved, felt that something momentous was about to unfold. Christmas Eve held the promise of being unforgettable, not just a celebration, but a night of answers that might forever change how the village saw the Nativity and their faith. Christmas Eve arrived, bringing a mix of anticipation and tension to the residents of St. Aurel. Snow fell gently, covering the village in a shimmering, silent blanket, as if even nature itself were awaiting something extraordinary. In the heart of the village, the nativity scene was illuminated by small candles arranged around it, casting a soft, flickering light over the wooden figures. People began gathering around the nativity, their breaths forming clouds in the crisp night air. An almost reverent silence filled the square, broken only by the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow and the occasional distant chime of bells. The group that had decided to investigate arrived early. They brought lanterns, blankets, and even a few chairs, determined to stay as long as necessary. These were men and women of various ages, some motivated by faith, others by curiosity, but all united by the sense that they were about to witness something unique. Children, kept indoors by their parents, peeked out from windows with wide eyes. While adults whispered stories about what might unfold, the atmosphere was thick with expectation, as if time itself were holding its breath. As the night wore on, the sounds emanating from the Nativity began to intensify. At first, they were faint whispers, like a breeze passing between the figures. But as more people gathered, the sounds grew clearer and more distinct. Some claimed to hear singing, others described it as a conversation. Though the words were incomprehensible, it was as if the Nativity was alive, radiating an unseen energy. The villagers' expressions ranged from awe to unease. For some, it was a miracle. For others, an unsettling mystery. The chapel priest, a figure of calm and wisdom, arrived shortly after midnight. He carried a small prayer book and a lit candle, which he placed beside the Nativity. His presence seemed to comfort those gathered, though even he appeared deeply intrigued by what was happening. Approaching the Nativity, he knelt and began to pray softly, asking for guidance and protection. The murmurs of the crowd quieted, and all attention focused on the sounds emanating from the scene. As the group stood watch, something unexpected occurred. The candlelight around the Nativity seemed to grow brighter, casting shadows that danced on the chapel walls. The sounds became clearer, and many swore they heard a celestial melody, something that resonated deeply in the hearts of all present. Some wept openly, while others embraced, overcome by an emotion they could not describe. It was as if the Nativity was conveying a message that transcended words, but was understood directly by the soul. The crowd, now fully enraptured by the mystery, began to murmur prayers and sing Christmas carols. Their voices joined together, creating a harmony that seemed to complement the sounds from the Nativity. The music echoed across the square, mingling with the falling snow. It was a moment of unity, where all divisions and doubts seemed to vanish. Every person present felt they were part of something sacred, something beyond human comprehension. The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone knew they were on the brink of a revelation, but no one dared move or speak loudly. The whispers from the Nativity now seemed to form a phrase, though no one could fully understand it. Some described it as a call, others as a message of peace and hope. The children, who had been watching from afar, began to venture out of their homes and join the adults, drawn by the magical aura surrounding the scene. As the night deepened, the crowd around the Nativity grew. Even those who had been skeptical found themselves drawn to the gathering. Some brought blankets to warm the children, while others shared food and hot drinks. The cold no longer seemed to matter. Everyone was warmed by the collective experience. It felt as though the Christmas spirit itself had descended, manifesting in a tangible and undeniable way. When the chapel clock struck midnight, marking the official arrival of Christmas, a profound silence enveloped the square. The sounds from the Nativity stopped for a moment, and everyone held their breath. All eyes were fixed on the figures, which now seemed more lifelike than ever. It was a moment of pure anticipation, with every heart open to receive whatever was about to be revealed. Then, as if in response to the faith and curiosity of those gathered, a gentle glow emerged from the Nativity. This was no ordinary light. It seemed to radiate from within the figures themselves, filling the space with an indescribable serenity. The villagers stood frozen, their eyes welling with tears, as a profound sense of peace washed over the crowd. In that moment, everyone knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. The village of Saint Aurel would never be the same. The moment everyone had been waiting for arrived with an intensity that left the villagers breathless. The gentle light emanating from the Nativity seemed to envelop each figure, highlighting the simple beauty of the wooden sculptures. Suddenly, a distinct sound, almost like an angelic melody, echoed through the square. People moved closer, their eyes fixed on the Nativity figures, which now appeared surrounded by a living energy. There was a palpable sense that something sacred was about to be revealed. The first sound many described was like a sigh, followed by a serene, almost ethereal voice. It was not an ordinary voice, but something that seemed to resonate directly within the hearts of everyone present. "Do not fear," said the voice, full of tenderness and love. It was impossible to pinpoint exactly where it came from, but all knew it emanated from the Nativity. The once restless crowd fell completely silent, every soul captivated by the moment. It felt as though heaven itself was speaking to them. Though the Nativity figures remained still, they seemed to symbolically come alive. The baby Jesus, with his closed eyes and serene countenance, radiated a light that conveyed hope. Mary and Joseph, at his side, exuded a silent, protective love, while the shepherds and animals formed a tableau that suddenly transcended time and space. It was as though the Nativity was not merely telling a story, but inviting everyone to become a part of it. The message began to grow clearer. The voice, now audible to all, spoke of love, reconciliation, and unity. "Remember the true meaning of Christmas," it said. "It is a time for forgiveness, for healing, for rediscovering what has been lost in your hearts." The words, though simple, carried profound weight. People who had been harboring resentment felt an inexplicable sense of lightness. Each phrase seemed to break through invisible barriers, allowing light to flood places that had been cloaked in darkness. Some began to weep, moved by the depth of the words. A young woman, who hadn't spoken to her sister for years due to a dispute, embraced her right there, tears streaming down her face. An elderly man, burdened by decades of silent guilt, knelt, feeling a relief that seemed to cleanse him from within. Each person in the square experienced something unique, yet all shared a common feeling. The Nativity was speaking directly to them, addressing the deepest wounds of their souls. The symbolic interaction among the figures became even more vivid. Mary represented tenderness and acceptance, while Joseph embodied strength and courage. The humble shepherds reminded everyone that true greatness lies in simplicity and meaning. At the center of it all was the baby Jesus, a beacon of hope and an invitation to renew faith and purpose. Every element of the Nativity seemed to convey a part of a greater message, harmonious and complete. At one point, the voice spoke about the importance of seeing others through the lens of love. "The world needs light, and you can be that light," it said. The words ignited something within each person. The cold of the night melted away, replaced by a warmth that came from the certainty that they were connected to something much greater. Even the skeptics, who had come out of curiosity or disbelief, were now moved to tears, their hearts profoundly touched. The voice also spoke of the future, encouraging everyone not to fear the challenges ahead. "Even in darkness, there is light. You are never alone." For many, these words were a balm, especially in times of uncertainty and difficulty. The message transcended the moment, echoing in the depths of every soul present. The connection to the Nativity, to Christmas, and to God felt more real than ever. At that moment, a striking detail drew everyone's attention. A star shone brightly in the sky, directly above the Nativity. It was a visual reminder of everything being said. Inspired by the scene, many villagers began to embrace, ask forgiveness from one another, and express gratitude. It was a collective transformation no one would forget. The square, once quiet and filled with anticipation, was now a place of joy, communion, and peace. The Nativity, which had carried the essence of Christmas, became a living symbol of renewal and hope. The voice that had spoken so clearly and powerfully began to fade, leaving only the echo of its words etched in the hearts of those present. The gentle light still emanated from the Nativity, as if to remind everyone that true change begins within. And so, the Christmas night in Saint Aurel became a living testament to the power of love and unity. Before leaving, many villagers remarked to one another that what they had experienced that night was a miracle. They knew that this moment was not merely one to be remembered, but one to be lived every day. The Nativity's message was clear. Christmas is not just an event, but a call to transform lives. And there, in that square illuminated by the light of the Nativity and the star above, the spiritual journey of each person began anew. The extraordinary revelation left an indelible mark on Saint Aurel, ensuring the village would never be the same. The impact of the words that resonated from the Nativity spread like the warmth of a hearth on a cold winter's night, reaching every corner of the village. The message of love, forgiveness, and unity not only touched people's hearts, but also sparked a movement of transformation that began with small, everyday gestures. Everyone present that night felt they had received something precious, something that needed to be shared. The first signs of change appeared the very next morning. Neighbors who had barely exchanged words due to long-standing disputes began greeting each other warmly. The streets, once marked by quiet routines, became spaces for encounters and reconciliations. A widow, who had not smiled since losing her husband years ago, was seen laughing while children played together, oblivious to the divisions that had once separated their families. It was as though the entire village had awakened to a new way of living. Individual stories were equally inspiring. A man known for his temper began attending the chapel daily, seeking answers and offering help to those in need. A young woman, who had planned to leave the village in search of a better life, decided to stay, driven by a desire to contribute to the community. Each resident carried a spark of the Nativity's miracle, manifesting it through acts of kindness and generosity that had never been seen before. At the heart of this transformation was the Nativity's message: unconditional love and reconciliation. A group of villagers organized a large community dinner, inviting everyone without exception to celebrate together. People who hadn't spoken in years sat side by side, sharing laughter, stories, and prayers. The tables were laden with carefully prepared dishes, and the atmosphere was filled with the gratitude and joy that words couldn't capture. The dinner became a symbol of unity, a living reflection of what the Nativity had inspired. The effects of the miracle extended beyond visible gestures. There was a profound, quiet change within people's hearts. Many began reflecting on their lives, choices, and faith. The chapel, once visited only on special occasions, became the village's focal point. Masses and prayer gatherings started drawing not just the devout, but also those seeking to understand what they had experienced. The priest, deeply moved by the transformation, organized meetings where people could share their testimonies and strengthen their spiritual bonds. One of the most touching stories was of two brothers who had feuded for years over a land dispute. On that Christmas night, hearing the Nativity's message, something shifted within them. The next day, they were seen working together to clear snow from the path leading to a widow's house. It was a simple act, but one laden with meaning. If the baby Jesus has forgiven us, who are we to hold grudges? They said, their voices filled with emotion. Their reconciliation deeply touched everyone who witnessed it. The experience also awakened a sense of collective responsibility. Villagers began caring for one another more attentively. A group of young people organized a food and clothing drive to support those most vulnerable during the harsh winter. Elderly residents who had once felt forgotten now received regular visits and constant support. It was as if the Nativity's message had planted seeds of solidarity that were now blooming in every corner of the village. The transformation also found symbolic expression. Inspired by the miracle, the villagers decided to restore the Nativity, preserving its marks of time while ensuring it remained a beacon of hope for future generations. The restoration became a communal effort, with everyone contributing in some way, sculpting, painting, or simply offering encouragement. During the process, many shared their experiences from that night, further strengthening the bonds between them. The change did not go unnoticed beyond St. Aurel. Travelers passing through the village remarked on its unique, almost magical atmosphere. Some took with them stories of the Nativity and the transformations they had witnessed. This drew visitors from other places, seeking inspiration and spiritual renewal. St. Aurel thus became a beacon of hope, spreading the Nativity's message far beyond its borders. Ultimately, the most profound impact of the miracle was the renewal of faith. Many who had harbored doubts or felt distant from God found a deeper connection. The Nativity's message was seen as a call to return to the true spirit of Christmas: faith, love, and unity. For those who experienced this transformation, the Nativity was no longer just a symbol. It was a living reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, God's light is always present. When the initial excitement faded and the village of St. Aurel returned to its usual rhythm, one thing became clear to everyone: that Christmas had forever marked the community's history. The nativity scene, which had often been a backdrop for traditional celebrations, was now remembered as the beating heart of a miracle. But what truly lingered in the memory of each person wasn't just the event itself. It was the lessons it carried. Lessons of love, forgiveness, and faith that would resonate far beyond that single night. In the days that followed, the nativity figures returned to their ordinary appearance. The soft light and sounds that had filled the square vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared. For many, this was a reminder that miracles, while extraordinary, are not meant to last. They are moments meant to transform, not to become routine. Yet the silence that returned to the nativity wasn't empty. It was a silence heavy with meaning, like a blank page waiting for new stories to be written. Many villagers began visiting the nativity regularly, not to seek sounds or lights, but to reflect and give thanks. The small altar beside the nativity became covered with candles and prayers written on scraps of paper. "Thank you for showing us the way," read one note. Another asked for strength to keep the spirit of that night alive in daily life. The nativity, now lovingly restored and cared for, became a spiritual gathering place, a source of inspiration for the entire community. Meanwhile, the fruits of the collective transformation continued to blossom. Long-standing conflicts were resolved, friendships were renewed, and new community projects began to take shape. The villagers decided to organize an annual festival centered around the nativity, not to celebrate the miracle itself, but to honor the message it brought. The event, called Christmas Light in St. Aurel, would attract people from different places, all seeking a bit of the magic and peace the village now embodied. Personal stories abounded, reinforcing the miracle's impact. Take Sophie, for instance, a young woman who had lost her faith after years of personal struggles. "That night, something changed in me," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I felt as though God was telling me that no matter how hard the path may be, He never abandons us." Or Antoine, a farmer who, after years of isolation, found the courage to reconnect with his family. "It was as if a light had been lit in my heart," he shared. These stories not only amplified the nativity's significance, but also pointed to something greater: the transformative power of Christmas. Throughout this period, villagers shared their learnings. Some reflected that faith doesn't need grand miracles to be strengthened. It thrives in small, everyday gestures. Others realized that the true spirit of Christmas isn't found in gifts or decorations, but in the love we share with one another. This rediscovery of Christmas's meaning became the greatest legacy of the speaking nativity. Ultimately, St. Aurel was bathed in a new light, Not the literal glow of the Nativity, but the inner light of every person who experienced the miracle and carried it forward. The transformation wasn't just about what happened that night, but about how each person chose to live from that moment on. With its snowy mountains and glowing streets, St. Aurel became a symbol of hope for all who heard its story. And now, I want to ask you, how can we carry this message forward? What did you think of this story? Did it awaken something in you? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know how you live out the spirit of Christmas. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this content with friends and family who might also find inspiration in this message. And be sure to check out the next video appearing on your screen, filled with reflections to enrich your spiritual journey even further. If this story touched your heart and you're ready to take the next step in strengthening your faith and renewing your hope, I encourage you to explore the ebook Light in the Darkness, Finding Hope at Christmas. It's filled with reflections, spiritual practices, and inspiring messages to help you find inner peace and purpose, especially during this special season. The link is pinned in the comments. Take a look and see how it can brighten your path. Thank you for watching, and may the light and peace of Christmas be with you today and always.